Hello. All right, we are here. We are ready to go. We are continuing. This is part 4 of building our Instagram clone. All right, I have here on the right our Photoshop mockup we've been using. Currently, we are working on the second page of our app, the profile page. So to give everyone an idea of what's happening here, I'm going to right-click on my index.html, reveal in Finder. We'll open this up, and it looks a little bit crazy because we are designing this for mobile. So I am going to right-click and inspect and click this little guy here, which essentially gives me a mobile view of my website. Okay, so yeah, we've made this page over the last few classes, and it's really nice, looks good. Aside from the icons being just kind of standard font awesome icons, and the fact that we haven't done the gradient coloring around here, we just have a pinkish purple. It's pretty close to how the website looks, how the app looks. So we have this page, and what we started working on last class was the profile page, which I haven't made clickable yet from here, but I think we made this this user clickable. There we go. It's just, you know, an HTML file called .profile.html. I'm going to just rearrange some stuff here. I can put this doc on the bottom, and we'll kind of move this to the right of our screen, and we'll pull our HTML over here, just so we can kind of see everything at a glance right now. So currently we are, we've done the top half of the profile, and we have sort of this bottom half to deal with now, this section here, and this whole section here. All right, so how are we going to do all this stuff? I am going to, for purposes of that, we've already kind of built something like this. Let's skip this section, at least for now, and actually move right on to the tab bar here, followed by the grid of photos. So going over here, and we're going to open up our profile.html, and we're going to write some new HTML. So we have the profile info, and it's all this stuff, the username and whatnot. I'm going to close my styles, give us a little more room, and we'll zoom for the viewers at home. Okay, so we are going to do this part. Trying to think of a good name for this. And I thought of one. We're going to call it segmented controller. Maybe not. I like kind of a tab bar, but we already have a tab bar. So I think we just need to get something a little more unique. So maybe we'll just call it profile tabs. And within there, we'll make a few classes of profile tab. Actually, let's keep this consistent with our tab bar. So we'll call it profile dash tab dash bar and profile tab dash bar dash item. So the only difference is the fact that we're prepending it with profile dash. And we will, inside here, we're going to need some lovely icons. So we're definitely going to have an I with a class of at least FA for font awesome. And that should be okay. And we're going to duplicate this a few times, 2, 3, 4 times actually. And let's go over to our lovely website, fontawesome.com/icons. And remember to click on free unless you are paying for it, just so you don't get excited by an icon that you can't get for free. Okay, so the first icon we need is something that represents a grid. So I'm going to look for grid. I kind of like this one because it's actually really representative, considering we're going to be doing a column of 3 columns. So it's called TH. Not sure why. I'm curious. Why is that called TH? Let's click on it. TH. In the wild. Solid style. Yeah, I don't know why it's called TH. I'm sure there's some like really good reason. but whatever, we'll call it TH. If we go back here and refresh, we should see that icon that we just put. And let's get a few more icons in here. So the next one is dictating. So this is like dictating whether you want to see it in a grid versus a list. So I think we need to find just something that represents list. Again, we're not ripping out the icons directly from Instagram at this point. We may do that at another time. So list, I mean, I'm cool with just even the bars, kind of, nah, maybe not the bars. Let's just use this one. So FA dash list. We got that guy. Then what's the third one? This is, I'm guessing, I don't remember in Instagram, but maybe those are things you've favorited or bookmarked. So let's just use the bookmark icon. I could be wrong about that, but we're just gonna do it anyways. FA/bookmark. And last but not least, these are the ones that you're tagged in. So let's take a look at some things. I'm gonna look at user. There's a lot of different users. And there's this guy here, user-tag. So I think that one makes sense. Oh, FAU, wait, why didn't the last one show up? Did I do it wrong? Yeah, oh, wait, no, what? FA user-tag. For some reason, maybe we have a different version of Font Awesome. We'll check that in a bit, but let's just see what's going on here by inspecting, make sure we didn't mess something up. So the last one right here, FA user tag. Yeah, it seems correct. So next thing I'm thinking is maybe the version of Font Awesome we're using is out of date, and this one doesn't exist yet. So updated in version 5.0.1.1. If we scroll up here, we should see, oh yeah, we're on like an older version, 4.7.0. So we could just try updating this, and I'm just going to assume the URL is just going to be 5.0.11, and let's just see. Nope. What was this before? 4.7.0. Let's just do 5.0.0. Nope, that didn't work either. Okay, new plan. We're just going to find another image. Okay, we got that back. So let's look back at our users, or even maybe we'll just look for tag, and we'll just do, instead of user tag, we'll just do FA tag. What? It does not like us. Oh, what? This did not. This is weird. Look, I have, oh, that's why. I replaced this icon. So we'll put that one back. We'll put this back to tag, and hopefully now everything works. There we go, looking great. Okay, let's do some styling here. So pretty simple HTML. We just have our, this will be the for the whole bar, and then each item within it. So let's open up our styles, and I will put them like this, just for reference. And we'll find where we were doing this. So now we're going to do .profile tab bar. And all we need to do in here, let's give it a background color. And if we look here, there is definitely a color that we want. I think, oh, it is just white. So we don't actually need a background color because our page is already white. It looks like there's just a border top that we need. So it looks like that DB thing. So border top, 1 pixel solid, and number sign, that code that we just pasted. So now we have that little line going there. There's probably a border bottom too. It's hard to see it because of the content butting up against it, but if I zoom enough, I'm sure we can find out. Yeah, you can kind of see it crossing there. So we're going to also do border bottom, 1 pixel. So now we have the nice border going on here. Now we definitely want some padding on the top and bottom. So I'm going to do padding of, and I'm just going to kind of eyeball it. Maybe we won't eyeball it. Let's calculate it. So we can count this, and it's 22, but because it's a 2x design, we need to half it. So padding 11 pixels, and then I'm actually do 0 left and right. So that'll put on the top and bottom. So now we have this nice little padding. Great. The other thing we need to do is we're using Flexbox now moving forward wherever we can, because it just makes layout a lot easier. So if I make it display flex instead of display block, we're going to see that these now go in a nice little order here. And that's really nice. One thing I noticed, though, our border is going right to the edge, whereas in here, there's this bit of space here. So you might think, oh, we could just add like, padding left of 12 pixels, for instance. But all that's going to do is the padding is happening here, but it doesn't work in the sense because the border doesn't, the border width is based on the size of the whole box, not its padding. So we actually need to use margin here. So let me just try doing margin left of 12. And then you can see, cool, it's looking pretty close, but I want it to like line up perfectly. So let's try 14. That looks good. And let's just see if we can do margin right of 14. And there you go. So now it doesn't fill the whole thing. It looks really nice. Going back to our file, the next thing we have to worry about is the fact that these guys, need to be a bit bigger. So let's see what the height of this is. It's 50 pixels roughly. So divide by 2 is 25. So if we make the font size of the icons, and to do that, I actually want to go dot profile tab bar item, and we'll stub that one out. But specifically what I care about now is the icon inside of it, so the I tag. We're going to give it a font size of 25 pixels, and there's definitely a different color we want to use here. So I'll grab my eyedropper and try and get this color here, 9999. Now they're a bit bigger and they have this this color on them. Is that color right? Yep, I guess so. Okay, now we want to space them out nicely. So because we're using Flexbox, we have the opportunity just to do something called justify content. And what we'll do is space evenly. So that makes it so that they are spaced evenly. So the same amount of spacing on both sides. And I'm going to I'll try space evenly. I think that's probably what on that one, but I'm going to do something called space between as well. And that puts them kind of edge to edge. That's not quite correct either. I feel like it's kind of a hybrid between these two, because to me, there's too much space on this side. So what we can do is keep it as space between, but actually add padding on the left and right to compensate for that. So right now we're doing 11 pixels on the top, 0. I'm actually just going to make it, let's try 11 on the top and bottom, and left and right 24. There we go. I feel like that looks pretty good. They have their own little home, and they're spaced out nicely, and I think we're good. Okay. So aside from obviously making these click and do anything, I think that looks fine to me. Oh, there is one difference. So there is an active state of which one you're looking at. We should handle that as well. So I'm going to add a class to the first one, tab bar item, and I'm going to call it tab bar item dash active as well. So there's 2 classes. And in our tab bar item, which we've already stubbed out, I'm going to stub out one specifically for active, and it just needs a different color. I think that's the only difference we need. And there it is, whatever color this is. Oh, you know what? Specifically, we want to change the color of the eye. So I'm actually going to move this down here, and that way it styles the color of the eye itself. And I probably didn't save something, or I made a mistake. Okay, so we have tab bar item. So profile, oh, I made the same mistake. This should be on here. So let me just make this a little bit bigger. In fact, we don't need as much space because we're doing mobile. I was putting it on the main tab bar. So profile tab bar item active. Just the little things in life. And we'll paste that, save this. There we go. Now it's blue. Whatever one is active. has a blue state. And what I want to show you while we're at it is how we could change these states on the fly. So if someone was to click on them, actually, no, we're not going to do that now because we're just going to build out the content here first. Okay, so we have our tab bar, and then underneath it, we are going to create, I'm going to make a div of a class called, I'm going to call it profile tab bar content. And inside here, we're going to make a similar class, but instead of content, we're going to call it grid. So this is so in the future, we can do something so that we can show and hide certain elements. So we put in this little guy here. In theory, we're going to have 4 of these: grid, list, bookmarks, and tags. So refreshing won't do anything. We just created this in HTML, but let's put something in the first one at least. So we're going to go I'm going to call it .grid item. And inside we're going to put an image tag with a source of our favorite place, placekitten.com. And we'll grab this URL and make it something like 180 by 180. Looks good. And we'll give that as our source. And I'm actually going to, just so that this isn't too annoying looking, I'm going to make this a one-liner grid item and the image all in the same line so that we can paste it roughly a bunch of times. Now, if you refresh, it's going to look like a huge mess, but it's actually not that bad, but a bit of a mess. Okay, so now we want to make these photos look better. Okay, so I'm going to split. I'm going to close this. I'm going to split down just for the purposes of the stream. So we have a little more thing to look at. And this is what we're dealing with now. So right off the top, I'm going to do this. We don't have to do anything to that yet. And specifically, let's also stub in this, which I don't think there's anything to do because it's just going to follow the same structure of the page, but we definitely want to style a grid item. Actually, we are going to want to style this. So the first thing we want to do is make the width of it, of a grid item. Let's just try 33% first and just see. Grid item, right? Okay. And then remember, anytime we have images inside things, images are always the same width as the image, the natural image actually is. So we need to also tell the image to have a width of 100%. So 100% of whatever its container. And now these guys look a little bit better. Okay. So what I want to do in the grid, though, is also make this display flex. And that's going to make them all go across there. And that's not really, what we want, but it allows us to use Flexbox. So we do that. And I think, let me just remember what it is. No, Flex. Let's do a quick Google. I'm just going to search for Flexbox 3 columns. Don't overthink. And I'm just going to missing something here. Flex wrap. That's the one I'm probably missing. There we go. So Flex by default will just squeeze and make things fit within the as many things as there are, and we have a lot. That's why I was going to all one row, but you can set Flex wrap to wrap so that it does continue on to the next row, much like we've been doing in columns. Now, there we go. I don't need that line. And then so we have this 33% here, and that works fine. To have them basically 33, but it's not perfect, and that's because 33 plus 33 plus 33 is 99, not 100. So a few ways we could deal with this. Like I could, essentially make this 32.3, so it's a little bit closer, and that's technically close enough. There's technically 1.1% missing, but your screen isn't going to be able to show you that detail. So I think that's fine. The other thing we want to do is in our design, there's a little bit of space between these things. So I think we can just handle that fairly easily by giving these a margin or on the grid item. Let's just give a little bit of padding on the actual container. Maybe I'll even just do 1 pixel. Close. So we got the 1 pixel around, 1 pixel around, but now that it's too wide, we have that problem. So if I change the grid item, this is a fun thing we can do, to box sizing border box. This is a nice trick you can do that essentially makes padding calculation part of its box instead of on the outside. And now when we refresh, we're good. So you'll see that for some reason, there's more on the top than the bottom, or more on the top and bottom than there is on the right and left. And I think partly that has something to do with the image, actually maybe having some white in it or something. Because I noticed that before. Adding 1 pixel. I wonder why that's happening. Just gonna zoom. Oh, I can't zoom. Grid item. I mean, we could solve this just by saying, okay, padding 1 pixel on, we could do 0 pixels top and bottom and 1 on the left and right. And then that looks fine. So basically it's putting a 2 pixel. I'm not sure where that's coming from. It could just be like a resizing issue of the image. Not going to get into it now because it looks fine. I'm going to copy this one more time just so we have a nice even grid. Okay, we have our grid. All right, the next thing we can do is our list view. So I am going to, and for the purposes of now, the way this is going to work is we're going to show this grid. And in fact, let's get rid of 3 just so it's not so much. So it's just like 9. And I'm going to put a list right here of a few things. And then we're going to figure out how can we toggle so that you only see 1. So I think if we're lucky and we built this in a good way, if I go back to the index and actually find a index HTML and look for when we start to have a post. So we have this post here. I'm literally going to copy and paste it to here. And inside list, we're just going to go like that. Then we get all the HTML of the other thing. So it doesn't look good. And that's because we don't have CSS targeting it specifically. Yes, we've written CSS for all these things, but they are all put behind, it's expecting it to basically be in a wrapper called, I think, post content or something, post list. So if we go back to our style and look for that post list, all right, that's all right, that's all right. Essentially, yeah, we would have to do a bit of a refactor or a copy and paste to make this all work the way that we want. I don't really want to do that because that's going to be annoying and we're going to have way too much code. So what I'm just going to do, and this is a perfectly fine way to do it, is in our profile HTML, where we started this. So we had this thing, profile tab, content list. What I'm actually just going to do is wrap this whole thing in post list. And we'll go all the way down to our closing div. And we'll probably have to indent one to keep this clean. Oops, okay, whatever, that's fine. Left to right it is. And if we refresh now, it looks great. So all we did was wrap it in the same, this post list thing that all of our CSS is expecting it to be within. And it just works as like a little module now that we can, we can put this, we can copy and paste this on other pages when we have it. So cool, we have a guy here. All right. So that's good. What next? Well, we're not going to worry. Bookmarks, I think, will probably be, more or less the same as this. Same with ones that are tagged in. I haven't opened the Instagram app in a bit, but I'm pretty sure it's just showing that. So really all we care about for learning purposes, at least right now, is how can we toggle between these two things? Although there probably, because CSS has some crazy magic associated with it that some people know how to do, there probably is a way to hack something together and actually make, these things work the way that with just CSS. But it's usually when people do that kind of stuff with CSS, it's because they're just up for a challenge and, it's for some like coding competition or something like that. So that's not the way we are going to handle it. We are going to use a very light amount of JavaScript right now to do this. So we talked about JavaScript a little bit in the past, not yet during the Instagram clone that we've been making, but I think it's about time to start putting a little bit in so we can have certain types of interactivity. So let's get right to it. So let's see. Essentially, yeah, what we want to be able to do is have this whole section, which is the, what do we end up calling it? This list. We essentially need it hidden by default, and this one visible. But then when you are to click one of these, it will change which one is visible. So we're going to just write some JavaScript specific to this page to do this. And we're not going to use right now any libraries, like we're not using Angular, we're not using jQuery, React, any of those things. We're just going to do it with pure vanilla JavaScript because even though it's a little trickier and harder to maintain than using a proper framework, you do have to understand the basics before you dig into that kind of stuff. So I'm going to go to the bottom of, I'm going to actually keep this where it is, and I'm going to open up my profile on this side as well. We can have the same page open up in VS Code in two different screens. And what I'm going to do is just before my closing body tag, I'm going to create a script tag. So opening script, closing script. So this is a place where your browser will be like, oh, there's some code there. There's something that needs to execute, and it will execute it. And just to sort of show that this is in fact happening, I'm going to write a very simple function called alert. This is just a built-in JavaScript function. You've seen it before. I'm just going to say alert hi. If we refresh here, we get this wonderful message that just says hi. All right, so we know that JavaScript's working. Okay, and we're going to start this really, I'm going to try to make this as basic and straightforward as possible because it is, JavaScript's different than HTML and CSS, although they all work very well together. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is I'm going to create another class here. Profile tab content. I'm going to just add another class here called hidden. Okay, saying that we want to hide this. Now, hidden on its own doesn't do anything. We still need to say something about it. So back in our CSS, we'll find where we have the profile tab bar content. Profile tab bar content. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to just say any divs that are hidden within here, I want them to be display none. So that's another display property. I don't even know if we've used it yet. It's very useful for these kind of things, especially essentially, the HTML still exists and the browser knows it's there, but it's not going to render it. It hides it. So if we are to refresh now, we'll see we're just back to our grid. All right. So essentially now, because we have CSS, understanding like, okay, if it has a hidden class on it, don't show it. We're in a pretty good spot to do something with it. And all we're going to be doing with JavaScript is essentially adding a class and removing a class from an element when we click things. That way, things toggle as expected. So the very first thing we want to do is we want to essentially add an event to this right here, this little guy right here. So I'm going to find that little guy in our HTML, and there it is. And I am actually going to give these things an ID. So we're only going to worry about the first two for now. And I'm going to call this, I'm going to call it still profile tab. Oops, sorry, wrong spot. I want to do it on this div. ID equals profile tab bar item. Maybe we can profile tab bar item, and we call this, I think this is called grid. I'm calling it grid. And we're going to also add this same ID to here, except instead of grid, call it list. Okay. So the only time we use IDs, in my opinion, is when we want to target something with JavaScript. Try and use classes for CSS and IDs for JavaScript, and you'll have a better time, in my opinion. You can technically style things with IDs and CSS by using the number sign, but I don't think it's good practice. Okay, so I'm going to copy this here, and we're going to write a little bit of a thing here. So I'm going to make a variable, and I do that by writing var, and I'm going to call it just grid button, like that. So I'm using what's known as Camel Case. Basically, first word is lowercase, and instead of doing a space or a dash or anything like that, you just make the next letter capital. It's a good practice. There's other types of cases you could use, like you could decide you want underscore based. That's just as good. I just don't think it looks as pretty as this. Things you can't do is you can't use a space, because now it's thinking it's two different variables and it's getting this little error here. You also can't use a dash, because that makes it think that you're trying to subtract these things. So we're going to stick with this. So we're going to call that grid button. And what we can do is we can look for an element. And I'm going to look for it by going document, which is a reference to my entire page. Document.get element by ID. And there we go, grid button, document.get element by ID. So this basically looks at your document and looks for an element with the ID that you pass in here. I'm going to put a semicolon at the end. It's not required in JavaScript, semicolons. There's just some weird cases that are required. So I usually just kind of go, hey, let's just keep them there as always, to say that we're done with that expression. Okay, so we have a grid button. And what I'll do, because I want to do this really slow and walk everyone through what's really happening here, is there's another built-in command similar to alert called console.log. And you can console.log words, you can console.log numbers, you can even console.log objects. So by passing that in here and refreshing and going to my console, which is this tab here, I can see, okay, yeah, it found this thing. And you know it does, because it didn't throw an error. For instance, if I was to rename this to something that doesn't exist, I'm going to see null. It couldn't find it. And there it is, and it tells me everything about it. So this is handy. And I can also tell by mouse overing it over here, it actually kind of highlights where that thing is. So we know that that's working. And we're going to copy this whole line and call this list button. Profile tab bar item list. And we can, again, console.log the list button just to make sure. I'll put my semicolon at the end. And we'll see, yeah, okay, we got the list button. Awesome. Okay. So now the first step is we want to add an event listener to both of these things. We're going to start with the list button because it's our main action right now that we want to make happen. I want it to go between here and here, but we'll obviously have to repeat this same thing for the grid. So now that I have that cast into a variable called list button, I can go list button dot add event listener. The first parameter of add event listener is what kind of event am I listening for? In this case, I care about a click. And in web, click on a mouse or touch for the most part is the same. Your browser, when it is an old phone, still triggers a tap event. Even though you're not clicking with a mouse, it's still triggering it as a click. So we essentially do that. And I will try and explain this fully after, but I'm just going to write it out. Essentially, we have to tell it what to do when when that happens. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new function. So let me just name this function, and I'm thinking of calling it set list active. Okay. Now, right now, this is going to throw an error when I click. And in fact, it happens even before it. And I bet if I click, yeah, it's just completely thrown an error. And that's because this doesn't exist. There's no idea what this is. So we need to make this thing. So I'm going to do this at the very top because this is a reusable thing that might get used throughout. So I want to create a function. Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to paste that yet. To create a function, and a function is essentially a reusable thing that can run on your site. And it can, just do one little tiny thing, or it could do a ton of things. This one should do a pretty, this should be pretty simple. So to denote a function, we actually just write the word function, give it its name. We have to give it these curly these parentheses, and then curly braces. Anything within here is what happens when that function runs. So for instance, if I just do an alert of test and come back here, if I were to click this, I get test. So basically what's happening, we have a list button by getting it by that ID, and we add an event listener, specifically a clicking listener. When that click happens, it knows to run this function. And every time you click, it's just gonna keep running that function once for every click. So pretty straightforward. So we have set list active. So now what we need to do is probably make some more IDs. So the point of doing this is when we set list active, we essentially want to add that class. There's a couple things we want to do. We need to add a class to this to make it blue. But we also want to change, remove that hidden class from this one as well, and add a hidden class other thing. So there's a few things that are all going to be happening in overlap. So we'll start small. Let's just deal with the color change. So, and in fact, I am actually going to move this function down here. Keep those variables right at the top. Technically, the order doesn't matter. It's just nice to kind of think logically. If I'm going to reference something up here, it's good to make the reference or make the declaration before I reference it. So on here, we want to take our lists. Whenever we click, the first thing I want to do is list button, and we can take its class list. So this is the lists, the classes that it has, and we want to add a new class to it. And specifically, we want to add active, I think. It's actually this. We're going to add that class. And if we refresh now, you'll see when I click, so it's gray right now, and when I click, it's blue. And the reason that's happening, when I go to the inspector, we'll see, okay, this is just a normal tab bar item. But once you click, we just added to its class list this other class, and that's what made it blue. So that's good. Something else we want to do is remove it from there. So on our grid button, .remove, and this will essentially, if this class exists on that, it will remove it. So now we got this nice little, it's blue over here, gray over here, blue over here, gray over there. So that's working, but it's not clicking back. Kind of makes sense because all we've done is made a function for set list active. So let's also make one for the grid item. So grid button, and we want to go, instead of set list active, set grid active. So we'll copy and paste this function, set grid active. And essentially, all we're really doing here is changing this around. So here we had grid button, remove the class. This time we're doing grid button, add the class, and vice versa. So now when we run this, we should be able to go back and forth. Awesome. So we're changing the color, not really useful. I mean, it is useful, but the fact that the content isn't changing makes it less useful than, of course, it could be. Okay, so there's two more things we need to do in here. So let's look at what we're really doing here. I'm going to add some IDs to this as well. And I'm going to use the same ID as the class name, which there's no issues doing that. They don't conflict. Classes and IDs are separate. So we just add an ID called profile tab bar content grid, an ID called profile tab bar content list. Meaning, with JavaScript, we can very easily make a few more variables. So I'm going to call this one grid content, and it's equal to document.getElement by ID. And we're going to literally copy this ID. And similarly, list content, list. And just to prove that this is working, it's always good to do these kinds of things. Let's just onload console log the grid, and we see, yeah, okay, when we're console logging grid content, it seems to be correct. Yeah, this is exactly what we were expecting. So we don't need that anymore. Okay, so when the list is active, we essentially want to go to our grid.content, and we're going to add a class to it. Class list.add hidden. So when we set list active, we are essentially going to want to hide that grid, of course. And we do it. Set list active, grid content, class list.add. Oh, right. It's not actually, is it hidden? Tab bar content. Let's see if it's happening. So let's just go. Sometimes it's good to look at our elements, and we see. Let's just inspect this. Look at our grid. So in theory, when we click this, the word hidden should get added to this, and it does. So that part's working. For some reason, it's not actually hiding, and it's probably due to CSS. So where do we do this? Profile tab bar content. Dot hidden. Yeah, it should be anything with a class of hidden should be hiding. What did we mess up here? Explain. That makes sense. Okay, so what is happening here is we're telling it to be hidden. We're telling it to be display none, but then later on in our CSS, we actually tell it, you know what, display flex. So there's a couple ways we could deal with this. One is if we actually move this further down, it should be the thing that takes precedence. So that does work. However, there's also this nice little trick you can do for these kind of situations. If you do a exclamation mark in the word important, what it's kind of saying is anytime it's basically making this stronger than if it was just here without it. So now it does go away because if you look here at our things here, even though this is declared before, because of the word important, it's essentially saying, you know what, listen to me, no matter what someone else says, unless that other person also has important on it, take what I say. So that's how we're going to solve this, because really when we have hidden, we want to make sure like, yeah, it's hidden, it's gone. In the case that we already had an important on this one, you're going to see that because they both have importance, it is still going to take the one that is further down. It's because of the cascading nature of CSS. So if that needed to be the case, you can actually stack importance. I can actually have important space important, which then is like, you know what, I'm more important now. Did I mess something up? Wait, that's weird. Display none, display flex, yeah, maybe that. Okay. Let's not worry about that. We're just going to do what we should and have it like that. There we go. So now we're looking good. We're hiding something, but that's not really, the only thing we need to do. Going back to our profile. The other thing we want to do is our list content dot class list. We need to remove a class of hidden because that's already on there. So now we actually come back to, this one gets hidden. That's what that line there, and the other one removes its hidden. So they just essentially get swapped. Pretty, I know it's a little bit different than the CSS we've been doing. There's a little bit of JavaScript here, but it allows us to do these kinds of things. Okay, so now the other thing we need to worry about is, oh, what happens when, we go back between this? Well, we need to essentially do the same kind of thing. So we want to tell list content dot class list. We want to add the class hidden, and on grid content dot class list dot remove hidden. So these functions, if you look closely, they're essentially the exact same, with just a slight difference on what's happening. Boom, 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 boom. There we go. So we're doing 4 things, which makes sense. There's 4 lines. Every time we click, four different commands are running. When I click this, it is adding the blue to this and removing the blue from the other one. And it's adding the hidden class to this, and it's removing the hidden class for this. And there we go. We have a little bit of toggle. And of course, we could copy this logic and do these other two pages. But I think this is fine for now, because that's just going to get essentially repetitive. We would essentially have to have, instead of 4 lines here, we would actually have 8, and all these functions would become 8. But you could see the pattern if you were to build these out on your own and do it. I'm just going to add the semicolons back in. Again, they're not required, because browsers are smart enough to know that you've finished running something, but I like to keep them. And I'm just old school. And there you go, going between these guys. All right. I just want to add some more. Let's copy and paste this line, just save a few more guys, just so we can show the scrolling. Yep. Okay. Make it a nice even amount. And there we go. Boom, boom, boom. All right. Last but not, well, maybe not last, but the next thing I've noticed, well, let's look back at our design, make sure we're not missing anything obvious. I know that we're missing this guy here, so we might whip that together at some point. But let's, currently we have this amazing tab bar, but it doesn't do anything. So we're going to make it do things. And this will be pretty straightforward. So we'll go to our tab bar, and what we're going to do is actually wrap our pages in an anchor tag, like so. And I'm just going to get this number set first, make sure it doesn't affect things. It does a little bit, and we'll fix that in a bit. But essentially, we want to make sure this goes to index.html. And similarly, our profile tab except instead of going to index, we want to go to profile.html. Cool. So we go here, look, we're coming home. That's great. Now we need this same logic to essentially apply to our home page so that we can come back and forth. So I'm just copy and paste this whole snippet that we made so that we can go home and go here, go home, go here. Now you may notice that our links became purple. That's because that's the default color of a link when it's been visited, and we've been to both of those pages. And they're showing up now because we didn't have a link before. They were just kind of icons sitting there. So let's go back to our CSS, and we're going to go, I think we did this somewhere near the top. Tab bar, here we go. So we just want to give these a color of, and I think they were just the default, whatever our body default was. I don't think it was actually 000. It was this number here. So we just give these a color, and now they're back in black. All right, there we go. We are looking good. Hi, Howie. My cat just left the room. Okay. All right. So I think that's pretty good. I'm just going to open this Photoshop file again. Yeah, the only other thing we can put in, let's throw this guy in real quick, because we've kind of already done this somewhere. So where have we done this? Well, we kind of have something like that right here. So we're going to essentially go to our home page and look for that thing that we made. So we have the story list item. I'm literally going to copy everything from here, I think, to here. Go back to our profile. And this happens right before the tab. And we're going to paste it in. And OK, that looks pretty good. Now, the content here needs to be a little bit different. For instance, this, I think, is where you would show your highlights. So let's put in, instead of your story, do IGTV. And yeah, we'll grab some other things like food, travel, lifestyle. Yeah, that should be fine. And then I feel like these, at least in the design, didn't have this class on it. So we'll get rid of that. Save, refresh. Oh, right, that wasn't the thing to do it. It's the gradient circle we want to get rid of. So it looks a little more like it. And then there's this little bit of, this feels a little bit tight. Now, I don't want to necessarily update the global style that we've done for one of these, because otherwise it can affect the other page too. So very simply, we can just look for our CSS declaration for the tab bar and actually just give it some margin at the top. Margin top of, let's just try 8 pixels and see how it looks. There we go. Now, yeah, there's a border on it though. And that's because literally in our, if we go back to our homepage, we have a border on the bottom of that thing. So actually, here's a good solution. I realized 2 things. That border that's here, as much as it's a border, right now it's a border bottom on this, but it could just as easily be a border top on the post. So let's find where we did that. So story list item, story list. Yeah, so it has a border bottom. So if I get rid of that, you're going to see on our homepage that it's gone. But what we really want is in our posts, we could, oops, let me undo. Okay, I'm going to copy this. I'm going to move this line, so I'm cutting it. And I'm going to go to my post list. And instead of bottom, we'll make it top. And this should now look exactly how it did before. It's just the borders on this element instead of that element. All right, so that's fine. Now, I was also thinking, I feel like, and I don't think our Photoshop file even has an example. Instagram, I'm just going to open up this one here because you only see one. I have a feeling though, and without opening up Instagram to confirm it, that we probably want that same border should be on the top of every post. So there's kind of like a little bit of separation between these. So don't ignore, but I'm going to take this thing that I just put and actually put it on the top of the post. And because we have multiple posts, now we're going to see, okay, there's a border there, and there's also one there. There's also one there. Just separates them a bit nice, as they probably should be. Which means if we go back here, we are solved because it no longer has the border on the bottom of this, and this looks good, and it's scrollable, and everyone's happy. Okay. The only other thing missing is that IGTV is kind of like a little bit, it has its own little thing happening here with this little divider separated. So we want a divider on between the first one and the second one. So let's figure out a good way to do that. So IGTV, and what I'm going to do is make a class in between here. And instead of story list item, I'm going to call it story list spacer. And if we are to refresh, we shouldn't see anything different because we haven't styled this yet. Story list spacer. So now we'll go back to our styles and look for that story list item. Yep. And we're just going to go story list dot story list spacer. I'm just going to give it a width of 1 pixel. And let's just try a height of like 40 for now. Background color is to be determined. I'm sure it's a color we've already used. There we go. And if we refresh, it's never as good as you want, right? So the problem that's happening here is we are floating things here, and floating can be complicated and annoying. So we have the float left here. So I think probably the easier way to fix this is also tell the spacer to float left. And there you go. So now it is floating left. It's not perfect. It's not in the right spot, as you can maybe see. And I'm going to, for now, I'm just going to copy this line just because I know it's probably hard to see on this stream. I'm just going to make it red just so we can really see where it is. So we definitely want to make sure that there's some margin on the top. Let's just try 16 pixels. And we also want to make sure that they're, now, if we look at this, yeah, there's definitely a little more spacing when, like the spacing between here and here is 70, and the spacing here is like 40. So it's not half, but there's definitely more spacing. So we can deal with that. So what I'm going to do is actually just give it a margin right of 12 pixels, just kind of guessing. And that looks all right. And then I actually want less margin on the left. So right now, margin left, if I do 0, that's what it is right now. But I can actually do negative margins. I'm sure we've probably done this, but I'm not 100% sure. But if we do like -6, it's actually going to pull the whole thing back. And that looks, yeah, that looks pretty good to me. We could probably increase a little bit more. For instance, we made this 16. Okay, and then we want to compensate by just making this maybe -2 so that they're centered. But yeah, that looks pretty good. And we'll get rid of the red, put this guy back so that doesn't look too bad. And I think that looks pretty nice. So we got a little bit of a spacer. Yeah, all right, I'm happy. And we're at the end of our hour. Okay, so for all those watching at home, we will be continuing this on Wednesday of this week. And for those watching on YouTube, depending on when you're watching it, next one might already be available. What we're going to do next is we've kind of built this project, at least the main pieces for it. And what I'm going to do is show you, because really, whether you're, the fact that you're building something like this with a lot of repeated pieces, for instance, we have a tab bar on every page, we have a header, there's stuff like that are repeatable. That is really difficult to maintain. What we are going to do is actually add a bit of a workflow into the way we're building things, which I will completely introduce next class, so that we can have sort of like reusable modules and whatnot. We're also going to do a bit of an introduction into SCSS, which is, what does it even stand for? It's basically a way we can write smarter CSS that allows us to not have so much repeating code. Because for instance, when you scroll through here, like this pattern is happening a lot, and it's the proper way to do it when you're writing CSS, so that you're targeting a very specific thing, like this, and then we repeat, then we repeat, then we repeat, and it just goes on. There are better ways. So that's kind of what we're going to be doing next class, is getting into a bit of like workflow stuff, which is, just for our purposes, it makes life easier, makes your code cleaner, better, more productive. All right, thank you for joining, and see you in a couple days. That's not the right one. All right, until next time, bye.